Hey, welcome to Personality Hacker TV, Season 1, Episode 1. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And this is a brand new live TV show, internet TV show, which is not just us on camera talking, but we actually have a live call-in number for you to call in and talk with us live on the air. If you've ever listened to the Personality Hacker podcast, the audio podcast, we typically record it asynchronously. So we record it and then we release it, a week later. And at the end of every show, if you ever listen, you'll hear me say, you haven't had a microphone. You haven't been able to talk with us during this show and talk about the topics we're engaged in. But you can go over to the website, leave a comment, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this show, you don't have to go make a comment or go over to the website because you can actually call in live and speak directly with Antonia or myself live on the air anytime you want during one of these live shows. Now, if you're watching this replay, you'll have to go to the website. But if it's live right now, there's a number in the description field and also in the comment field we keep posting over and over again. Call that number and join us live on the air and talk about whatever topic you want to talk about. Now, here at Personality Hacker, we're interested in personal growth. We want you and us, everybody that comes into our world, our sphere, to grow in their personal development. And we love the lens, looking at personal growth through the lens of personality typology and models of human development, different systems, different thinking about systems, ways to understand ourselves, our identity, and each other as we all grow together on a growth journey in our lives. So if you've got a question about personal growth, personality types, any personality type system, we're familiar with a lot of them, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. These are some things you could call in and talk about. If you've got specific questions, comments, stories you'd like to share, this is going to be a show that you're going to help create with us. It's a co-creative show that's going to evolve over time as we take callers, as we get our voice. And I'm reminded of the early days when we started our podcast. We kind of, at first, didn't exactly know where it was all going to head, but after we got going for a while, 6 years later, we have a podcast that a lot of people appreciate. A lot of people are involved in, and I think if you've heard it, I think it's good stuff.
Well, so, basically what you're saying is we're finding our sea legs.
Yeah, we're finding our sea legs today on our first episode,
right.
Season 1. So
yeah.
So the call-in number's there. Please feel free to call in. You're going to call in. You'll hear us live on the air when you do that. And then Cheris will pick up the phone eventually at some point, depending on how many people have called in. She'll have a quick chat with you and say, hey, what's your name? What would you like to talk about? She'll make a quick note for us. Then it'll kick over here. We can unmute you and then take your question live on the air. So we already have some callers calling in, which is awesome. So I'm going to actually kick over here.
I'm used to muting when I have to cough. I'm just going to have to cough, aren't I? It's a live show.
Yeah.
You're just going to hear bodily functions.
You'll probably just have to cough to the side. There you go. All right. So we're going to go over here to Chris. Chris. Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes. How's it going?
Good, man. Welcome to Personality Hacker TV. Where are you at in the world?
I am in Greensboro, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yes.
All right. And so do you have a question for us today, live on the air?
Let's make the assumption.
Well,
what's
could you
your
have
question?
a comment, question, something you'd like to say? What's up, Chris?
Yeah, so I do have a question. It just came to me. I'm so glad I checked Facebook and I was able to see that you were live.
Cool.
And so my question is, I'm an INTP, and I was wondering some of the things that I could maybe put into practice, some of the things I could do to make the jump from a grade 6, like the pluralistic stage, into the integral stage.
Ooh.
Like the tier 2 stages.
Okay. Sure. So your question then, just to make sure I understand it, is actually a question about the system that we here have referenced called either the Graves model or spiral dynamics, which basically charts different levels of the type of worldview that someone would take in over their lifetime. And as they go up this model, this kind of descriptive model of how they're experiencing the world, they take in more territory in the worldview. And we can look at that either on a macro level or a micro level. I'm just getting everybody else caught up in case they're not familiar with that system. And so what you're talking about is being a Graves 6 green level in the Graves model or spiral dynamics. And your question's around, okay, what do I do when I'm at that level? How do I move beyond that? What am I supposed to play in? Am I interpreting your question or your thoughts correctly, or is there any calibration you'd like to give on that, or you'd like to give on that?
Yeah, so that's completely accurate. I'm fine with what you said.
Okay.
It sounds good.
Cool.
So I have like a little, I mean, immediately like 3 or 4 questions came up. And by the way, I'm not sure how close you are to your receiver. I'm not sure if it's on my side, but I'm having just a little bit of trouble hearing you. So if you could get your mouth as close to your receiver as possible, that would, as I ask you these questions, that would be awesome. So my first question, thank you. My first question is, why on earth would you want to go to 7?
Well, it's because I like to keep developing. Like, I want to see how far I can go in my life, and I sort of hit the pluralistic stage, the grade 6, and which was great. And I found a community, and the first time I actually enjoyed communities. Mm-hmm. But now I'm seeing limitations with it, and so I have this sort of feeling like I'm going to do something great, but not at this level. Like, I need to go to a higher level, a new stage, somewhere else to actually solve whatever problems, whatever I'm trying to do in my life, like whatever truth I'm trying to speak and kind of bring to the world.
Why do you have a sense that you're not going to be able to do what you want to do at this level? Where's that sense coming from?
So it feels like that in grade 6, I have a lot of thoughts about things like, actually, it's not even thoughts. It's more of, I have a lot of emotions around certain things, but there's no action there. Like, what action do I take? Like, how do I get into this specific topic or area that I have passion for, and how do I actually make change? And I feel like I'm kind of stuck, because it's like, I can sit here and preach, you know, I'm just going to throw some very general terms out there, like don't destroy the rainforest, like in the Amazon, what's going on. But I can sit here and preach that, and I can boycott and do all this stuff, but that doesn't really get things done. Like, how do I feel like the next, to actually think about it in a holistic way, I need to get to that 7 and where I can actually make an impact.
Okay. When do you believe that you entered 6 or green?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, I'm sorry. When do you suspect that you entered grade 6 or spiral green?
Let's see. My first indication of it, well, not even that. Where I felt like, are you asking when I felt like I was fully into 6, or where I was entering into 6? I didn't catch if you had specified.
I didn't specify, but both. When do you believe that you entered it, and when do you believe that you were fully exploring?
Okay, so when I entered it, I believe that was around 2016. That's the closest I can come to it. Mm-hmm. Somewhere, oh gosh, I was not expecting that question. Maybe 2015, 2016, somewhere in those years. And now I feel like I'm seeing, like I'm seeing the next level, but I'm not getting there, kind of thing. Like, I'm seeing, like, we can use the colors, like shades of like little scratches of yellow, little pinholes of yellow. Okay. Just like I was seeing pinholes of green when I was in the grades 5 or the orange. Okay. Does that answer your question, or is that, was that off?
No. And do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I am 34.
Okay. All right. So here's my recommendations. There's just a couple of them, and then I'm going to put some caveats on them as well.
So we have more callers too.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I'm going to go. I'm trying to try to go fast. Or not fast, but I'm going to try to be aware of time, which is not something I'm usually good at. So the first thing I would do is I would make a map or a chart of when you believe you entered, explored, and exited every phase in your life. That's the first thing that I did. is I tried to get a really good map of when I believe I explored each of the levels. The reason why is almost everybody has a preference for either odd or even numbers. And we have a tendency to stay a long time in either odd or even numbers and then try to blitz through the ones that we're not as comfortable with. So all the odd numbers are more me-centric and all the even numbers are more community-centric. And every single person has a tendency to sort of vibe with one of those depending upon other elements or components of their personality type. Like I'm an odd numbered person. And I think it's because like if I could try to diagnose it, but my suspicion is because in the Enneagram, I'm social blind. I'm also an NT. I'm also a perceiver. Like there's a lot of reasons why I would probably have a strong preference for the odd numbers. So when I got to 6, I was in a really big hurry to get out of it and to get to 7 because I don't like the even numbers as much, right? Like they don't feel as good on me. But what I realized that 6 is beautiful for, and one of the primary things that 6 gives us, because you're right, like 6 is kind of an impotent phase, quite honestly. Like you don't get much done at 6. Like you said, it's too pluralistic. It's too like live and let live. It's too everybody gets a voice. Like it's just, it's
Burning Man breaking down.
Yeah, it's Burning Man breaking down. Basically, that's what 6 is. So 6 is a tough one to get shit accomplished in. So I can appreciate, and especially if you're an INTP, you might be similar to me. You might have a strong preference for the odd numbers as opposed to the even numbers. So whenever you're in an even number space, you're going to want to blitz through it. The challenge is that what 6 does is it's the last level of the first tier. So it preps us for the next tier. Right? It preps us for where we're going to next. And that means that we have to scoop up all the lessons of the first tier in order to have a good second tier experience, or at least that's what I'm suspecting. I don't know this to be true, but that's my suspicion. So what I did when I got to 6 is I was all like ready because I had just learned the Graves level or the Graves model or spiral dynamics at the end of my orange experience. I was at the end of my orange. I was hitting all the limitations of what orange could do for me. I mean, not financially. I had experienced orange. Stupidly, I experienced orange in a non-financial way, which is always the dumbest thing. But unfortunately, I did. And so when I got to 6, I was ready to get to 7, but I was not ready for 7. So I had a moment when I went, okay, I'm going to lean into 6 or green, and I'm going to let it happen organically, and I'm going to let 6 do everything it needs to do for me. And so what 6 does is it gives you time and space. And if you had a financially successful orange, which is recommended, it gives you enough financial space too to be able to do a bunch of personal development work. And that personal development work allows you to go back and look at all the lessons you didn't pick up from the previous levels. So make a map, chart it out, figure out where you entered and exited, and of course explored in the meantime, each of the levels, and ask yourself what lessons you got from it. And what were the lessons of that level that you missed? So it's very common for people in 6 to realize that they just didn't pick up the lesson of unconditional love at, say, 2, right? When they were in 2, their family was maybe, like had lots of fighting or anger management issues, or they never felt like they were part of a tribe or whatever. So a lot of people have to go do healing work in 2. Joel, when he got to 6, he had to go do 3 work. He had never had a rebellious teenage phase. He'd never had a warlord phase. And when you don't have a strong 3, you just kind of let people sort of run over the top of you. Some people have a really crappy 4 experience, especially these days, where religion and institutions are breaking down for people. And so they have a really bad 4, play well with others, my truth versus your truth experience. And then there's a ton of people now going to 6 very early, much earlier than any other time period in history. And they have a crap 5 experience. They never made peace with things like capitalism. They never made peace with making money and like gathering resource. So whatever it is that you didn't pick up in the first tier, 6 is your opportunity to do so. And sometimes we'll stay in 6 and churn there and not go to 7, not because we haven't fully explored 6, but because we didn't pick up those lessons from the earlier levels and they're needed for the second tier. Is this all making sense?
Yes, it's making sense. And I'd like to make a comment before.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I do have a comment. It's actually really validating that you made this the first point, because this is something that I have been working on for like a month. I was reading a book, and it just occurred to me I was actually reading a book, and I came across a specific website, and I was like, oh, it occurred to me I can actually go, now that this model exists, like the Graves model, I can go back and look at it and do exactly what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I do prefer the odd numbers.
Yeah.
You were correct in that. I do prefer the odd numbers.
Yeah.
So I can, when I really got into green, I did feel myself, in hindsight, I feel myself, I was trying to rush through this stage.
Yeah.
But I luckily had a mentor who slowed me down, and he was like, you really need to focus on this, this, and this for you specifically. And so I took time off work. I went to Europe 3 times,
mm-hmm.
and that's actually where I found my community, was in just outside of Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
And so I hung out there for a number of months, and it almost seemed like from like, for example, my sister made a comment while I was doing this. She was like, your life is like chaotic right now. And I was like, it doesn't feel chaotic to me. It feels really good, actually. I'm just doing all these different things.
Yeah.
Yep. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Perfect. That sounds awesome. And congratulations for finding your tribe. That's so important at 6. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Did you create a map like I'm recommending? Did you just have a prescient sense to create that map, or have you not done that?
Yes, and I'm still working on it.
Okay.
So it's more of like in progress.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So figure out what you haven't picked up, make sure to pick those up, and then just keep working on those. Make sure that you've got everything you needed from 6 in order to get to 7. Now, my caveat is this. They were wrong when they said that 1 is the loneliest number. 7 is the loneliest number that you'll ever see. 7 is a really lonely place to be. And remember, the second tier mirrors the first tier. So when you go to 7, like, everything feels warm and fuzzy at 6. 6 is like a nice warm blanket where you're like, it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. When you get to 7 goes back to being a version of 1, right? It's second tier that mirrors the first tier. So it goes back to a sense of survival. And all the warm, fuzzy feelings you had at 6 go away. And not only do they go away, but just like with every level that you bump up to, you start resisting the earlier level, right? Because you're trying to get some distance from it. You're going to resist the warm fuzzies of 6. It is a very isolating, cold, disconcerting place to be. So I don't recommend rushing there. It does feel like more, like there's a lot more ability to sort of think in terms of how to solve problems. But I will say this, in some ways, we are outpacing our problems are outpacing our evolutionary development to solve them. And when you get to 7, that becomes incredibly clear. And so more people getting to 7 is a good thing, because you want more people in that level of systems thinking working together, right? So that we can get to 8 and all that stuff and like try to figure out how to solve some of these world problems. But in the meantime, it's a desert, all right? It's like a desert where nobody lives. So my recommendation is enjoy your 6 experience. Get as much out of it as you can. Really, really, really explore, really feel sort of galvanized in this place, get all the lessons you want. And then when you get to 7, God have mercy on your soul.
All right. Thanks for that.
There's a great resource, by the way, a guy I've been following. You might have heard of him. He's a Silicon Valley investor. His handle is @Naval, Naval on Twitter. And I can't remember his full name, quite honestly. I'm looking for it right now. Ravikant, thank you.
Ravikant.
I think his insights, like as I read them, I'm like, this feels like second tier 7 yellow thinking. The way he thinks. He did a podcast, I think, with Joe Rogan recently. One of the most fascinating. I mean, I've listened to it a couple of times. It's a fascinating podcast. It's got some really interesting stuff. So that might be really helpful for you, Chris.
Yep.
As you're going through your journey, just to kind of get a sense of what's coming down the pike. That's kind of what I'm looking at, going, what's coming down the pike for me? What's ahead of me here?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a thought.
Yeah.
So.
Was that at all helpful?
Okay, cool. Can you spell his name one more time?
Yeah, Naval, Naval, Ravikant, Ravikant.
She's got his last name. I would have never known how to spell that at all. But yeah, it's @Naval on Twitter, and I've been following him a lot. I love the stuff he posts. I think it's really, it's meta level stuff. It doesn't get down to the mire of all the, political or religious or social bullcrap. It just talks about things from a structural systems side. And I really appreciate that about him. Yeah. Because that's the kind of thinking that I like. So thanks, Chris, for calling in, man. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, All right. Thanks
All right.
for your tips.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to another caller. This is Doug. Doug, are you there? Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Doug?
Can y'all hear me? I've been able
Yes.
to hear y'all the whole time.
Hi, Doug.
It's in my ears, so it's kinda cool.
It's really
Wonder
low.
about that?
Unfortunately, for some reason, it's really low.
We can hear you just a little faint. But
Yeah.
it's cool. Just where are you calling from, Doug?
Actually, sitting in the truck because I just happened to stumble across that y'all were on, and
Cool.
I didn't even know it was happening, and I was like, what can I think of to call about? So, yeah.
And where are you in the world in your
Right.
truck right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm in Gladewater, Texas.
Texas.
So, out in the middle of East Texas.
East Texas. The hot, humid part of
Yep.
Texas.
According to, yeah.
Not the dry, dusty part.
Rain from, no, not the dry, dusty part. The pine trees part.
Cool. That's cool too. I love palm trees.
Anyway, I just had a quick question. Always kind of looking for, I'm noticing patterns in everybody's lives always, but also just sort of trying to figure out what's going on with the way that I'm doing things, kind of looking underneath. And I've been noticing, as I've kind of been looking at the way I've been sort of disconnecting in some ways. I'm an INFJ, and I've been trying to trace back kind of where this started for me, and sort of more spending time organizing my environment. And I don't know if it's an SE thing or if that's I guess I don't know. I spend a lot of time making sure like things are structured and in order and working and organized and functional and all those things, but it also seems like I dive more that direction when I'm feeling more useless in my insights with people. Over the years, as me trying to help people understand themselves or see themselves, or and even before I was even aware of MBTI, just feeling like that either my insights were falling dead too often, or just noticing that people were people, and no matter how I tried to help, that it really often didn't matter what I had to say. And I understand that that's kind of human nature. But I just wondered if there is a pattern common with INFJs there, not just kind of like being disillusioned and disconnected, like after trying to use their insights to help people and kind of running into a wall and then withdrawing. I guess that's sort of door slam-ish, but almost from doing it at all in order to just kind of recalibrate and figure out what the heck to do with all that. I run into that a lot. Like sometimes my insights, then I start to seem pushy with them. I guess when they're not being received at times. It's one or the other, and it just kind of makes me want to I just kind of shut down and do my own thing.
Sure.
I guess I'm just curious if that sounds correct, or if I'm onto something, or if it's something that y'all hear often, or yeah.
So, by the way, thank you for sharing all that and calling in. Appreciate you being here. So let me just speak back to you kind of what I'm hearing you say, and you tell me if I'm uncalibrated. Like help make sure I'm hearing what you're saying. What I hear from you is that you, quite frankly, I hear a lot of pain in your voice. I hear a lot of like, I try to bring my gifts to the world as an INFJ. I have deep insights. I've got great perspectives. I've got great advice. And when I take it to people, sometimes I don't get the response that I would expect them to have, bringing all that amazing stuff that I bring to them. But I think this could really help them. I really deeply care. And so what sometimes happens when I don't get the response that I maybe expect, I just shrink back from that. And I go, you know what? I'm just going to take my extroverted feeling, instead of trying to be compassionate and help people, I'm just going to use that to organize maybe life around me and others to make it more ease of use and set up systems around me that can make interfacing with life better for people. But I don't think people want to hear my advice. I don't think they want to hear my perspectives. because it seems like when I share that, I'm not getting the response that I would expect from people when I share those things. Am I kind of close to what you're asking about? And is that typical for an INFJ? Is what your question is, right?
Yeah, I think you're on it. I think that maybe it's less costly if I just do, or it's just less. I guess I'm able to pull in sort of the what I see people need and just create the systems for them and do the things that work, instead of actually having to do the human work with someone, which is a lot messier, obviously. And I was saying all this, I completely understand that just because I'm trying to help, it's a weird tug and pull with inside of me, because I understand that people are people and they're not going to always respond, and I don't want to sound super immature that way, but there is a part of me that does start to feel like I'm not using my gifts or able to use my gifts in a way, and I'm in a context where I should be able to, honestly, but it sometimes just feels like it's still not quite what I should be doing. And I don't know, sometimes I guess that's when I wonder, if I should be counseling or doing something like that more. But then I go, well, also, in those situations, I absorb so much of people's pain that becomes a problem. So it's like I'm stuck. I don't know what to do with it. Like, this is a great gift for something, but I don't know what.
I think a lot of people that want to bring something to the world that helps other people, and I think intuitives struggle with this. I think sensors can too, but I think intuitives also, because we have gifts we want to bring, and sometimes when people don't understand the gifts we're bringing and they don't respond to it, we take that very personal, and it can be a lot of energy burn to try to bring those gifts. And you're like, I generated so much energy for you, and I brought this gift to you, and you don't even understand the value. Should I maybe just do other stuff? This is too much, maybe. This is like crazy. Why am I spending this much energy to people who aren't even receiving the gifts? And I think the first line is to not take it so personal, and I think that's tough for all of us to do. And I don't think you do, from what you're saying. And I think you're almost questioning yourself, it's
not that it's personal for me. It's just energy burn. And I guess it's sort of like, if I'm going to put this amount of, trying to dig inside of you and find the things that I think are harming you, etc. Well, it could be something light, it could be something deep or whatever. But if I'm going to burn that energy and then it's just kind of a waste over and over again, then it starts to get to a point where I just kind of start asking myself questions like, okay, maybe I'm not using this the way I need to be, and it feels like I'm burning energy more efficiently over here by, environmentally creating things that people need. But the problem is I feel, even when I'm doing that, it feels like I'm kind of like I'm in hiding. And that's what I feel like a lot right now, is that I'm sort of just taking care of needs and getting things done. But there's this other insightful part of me that feels kind of shut down. It's still there, but just as far as sharing with it. It's like I barely post anything on social media or anything anymore, because I've just kind of gotten to this place where I'm like, whatever on an insight, it's just going to be, it's something that I've really poured into it, probably no one cares, and, what's the point kind of thing. And I know, I mean, it all sounds very childish and immature in some ways, and in other ways I'm just trying to, it's like I've stepped back and just kind of try to feel it out and see, trying to gain inside myself, like, what is this? What do I do with this kind of thing? Like, I realize it's not healthy. I realize it's not where I need to be. But at the same time, I feel like I was kind of proverbially banging my head against the wall all the time. And what do I do with that?
Okay. So I'm going to get biblical, because every time you talk, another biblical reference pops in my head.
You get my Bible.
Yeah.
It's on a shelf somewhere.
I'm not going to get biblical, but I'm going to get biblically referential. I don't know what religious past you have, or if you have any religious past, but I grew up with the scripture where Jesus says, a prophet is without honor in his hometown. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so a prophet is without honor in his hometown. All right, so meaning that when people are used to you and you're just like them and you're just normal humdrum person, then who are you to tell them how to live their lives, right? Like, you're just a normal person. They know who you are. They know you have troubles and problems too. So when you try to offer insights to people who have put you at the same level of life problems as them, most of the time they're going to ignore your advice or not listen to you. And the reason why is because the vast majority of people, like, deep down inside, they know what the right thing for them to do is. All right, everybody has their inner wisdom banging at the door trying to tell them what to do to solve all of their life problems. Most of the time, it's not a problem of them not knowing what to do. It's a problem of removing all of the obstructions inside of them to get to the piece of information that's within them already. So after like a decade of coaching, it took me a ton of time to realize my job isn't to give them clarity. My job is to help them remove the obstructions they have within themselves for their own clarity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. I appreciate that.
So when you're telling people like, hey, shift your perspective and look at it this way, and here's a thing, they already know all that stuff. They're not doing the thing they're supposed to be doing, not because they didn't know. It's because there's something else that makes them not want to do it. There's some secondary benefit they're getting. There's a bunch of work they think is like represented in the thing that they're supposed to do. There are major life changes or whatever it is. Those are the obstructions. So
usually permission or motivation.
Yeah.
Typically.
Or just like, we're just not taught to have psychological muscle, right? Like, we're not taught any personal development muscle. And so when anything requires a lot of work from us, we just don't want to do it, right? Because first of all, we don't really know how much is involved in it. And second of all, we just don't have the stamina built for it. It's like taking up running for the first time in your life, right? Like, who does that? Very few people. Even though all of us know that we need to be doing cardio, 100% of people need to know that they need to be doing more cardio.
And a lot of people don't have systems set up to support their changes either.
Right. So it's like, yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff.
I'd be being arrogant if I said that sort of like, I think sometimes, like, I don't know, maybe it's just an intuitive thing, but it's like, sometimes I may appear to be like sitting on the cloud doing, here's what all you need to do, but I'm very aware of my own limitations and need for growth as well. You know what I mean? But I just know maybe where to look at it, Well,
actually, that's a backward way of looking at it. Because if all of us, if those of us who were doing coaching only did coaching after we had gotten all of our shit handled, literally nobody would be doing coaching, right? Like, every person on the planet has problems. Everybody's got something that they're trying to get through.
Imposter syndrome kind of thing. Yeah, I struggle with that imposter feeling a lot. Like, just, who am I to tell anybody anything kind of thing, even though I want to be helpful. But, one thing you said earlier, and I don't want to answer too much, I know you got to get on to college probably, but it's something that hits me quite often, and it starts to, I don't want to sound arrogant saying this, but, when it feels like sometimes that insightfulness piece is, and maybe I'm just being me and feeling this way because it's my own, perspective, it's what I live with, but, if I have people around me all the time, and it's like, maybe it's a T dominant person, or maybe it's an FE dominant person, or whatever. But people know like what their gifts are, and acknowledge them for those things, and consider them, maybe like the person to go to for those things. But when it comes to insight, it feels like everybody. I know everybody has insight, and I'm not trying to act like I'm the only one who has it, but it feels like that kind of gets dismissed as maybe I'm the person who puts the 10,000 hours in about thinking about things all the time. And so maybe I might have more, thoughts around some things because I've done a lot more work on it, just thinking about it, perspective shifting on it, nuance, all those kinds of things. And oftentimes it feels like to me that everybody thinks they've got that part covered, even if it's super obvious to me that they put like 5 hours in on thinking about something. And that kind of frustrates me at times too, where it's like, Joe was saying earlier that maybe my gifts aren't being honored, and maybe that's where that is with some of it. I feel like that, some deeper human core issue sort of things that are soundbite things, now. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's saying something. But most of those things, I've put a lot of time on thinking about them, and it feels like I get in conversations too often with people, and I'm like, my insight just doesn't even matter, even though I've thought about this, so much. So sometimes I feel like that's what's happening with me too. Is I just feel devalued in that no one even is aware, and maybe that's the profit not being recognized in your own town, because I'm just Doug, and everybody knows me, and but they're not realizing what's rolling around in my head all the time. I hesitate because that sort of sounds super arrogant. And
no.
That's the last thing I want.
No, okay. So time. There's like 3 things that you have to hear. Okay. And there's a couple things you want to hear. I can hear what you want to hear. Okay. I know what you want to hear. You want to hear that INFJs are super insightful, that you have a gift that the world absolutely needs, that the world is not appreciating the gift you have to bring, and all of those things are true. All right. You want to hear all that because it's all true, and you need to be validated for all of those things. That is accurate. You do have gifts that the world needs. People aren't listening to you.
I want to hear it, and I don't want to hear it.
No, you need to hear those.
I don't want to.
No. Okay, so I'm also hearing that you have a big issue with modesty and humility, meaning not that you are not a humble person, but you're not owning the things you're good at, right? You want to desperately own what you're good at. You want to desperately give yourself permission to feel good about being an insightful person. But for some reason, you think that makes you, well, I don't know if it makes you think that you're a bad person, but there's something that's like rejecting it inside you, so that every time you think I'm an insightful person, you're looking to the outside world to validate it for you, because you haven't given yourself permission to just lean into the fact that you're an insightful person. So when you put something on Facebook, and Facebook being, I unfortunately, I have to say all the stuff that we have to say, and we have to move to the next caller. Unfortunately, I know that's super invalidating, and I apologize, but I just have to say these things because like they're just stacking up. Every time I like anchor something to say, I go like this, and I have like this many after the stuff you've said. So you just have to listen, all right? Are you okay with that? I'm sorry, I just ran over the top of you.
But she does this in fights too.
I do.
I'm like all these points. She's like, I can't wait to talk. Give my points.
I know. So you have to give yourself permission to know that you're an insightful, awesome person. You have to stop looking for social media to be the thing that will validate it, because social media sucks and it's the cesspool of humanity, and we all know that. So don't go to social media. If you give insights to friends of yours, and they're not listening to it, remember a prophet is without honor in their hometown. All right, so none of those people are going to validate you because they don't want it. They're rejecting high quality information, not because they don't have the information in them, but because they have too many obstructions to hear it. So that's just how it is. So here's what you need to do, all right? Number 1, you need to stop with the false modesty. We did a whole podcast on the concept of modesty. Go look it up. We talk about what modesty actually is, all right? And that's
I've listened to it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Listen to it again, all right? Listen to it again. You need to give yourself permission to be awesome in the ways that you're awesome. If you don't, you're not going to have the assertiveness you need in order to give the world your actual gift. It feels like the world's not going to taco out of your hand. It's not because you haven't made an absolutely delicious taco. It's because your presentation isn't what the world is looking for. It needs more assertiveness from you. It needs less false modesty, all right, or this weird relationship with modesty that you have. It needs you to own your awesomeness, and it needs you to go out. And if sharing insights with the world is the thing, when the world rejects that, if that's exhausting to you because that's what you have to give, then you need to go formalize it and you need to charge for it. All right, get yourself to a place where you're a formal coach, where you're actually a therapist, do whatever training, whatever certifications you need to get, whatever you need to feel permission to go out and be a coach, or to actually get your formal therapy or whatever. And then what I heard you say is yeah, but I get really tired as an INFJ, so I don't want to go do that. Okay, whatever excuse that one was, go handle that too, all right? Because I'm also hearing you talk yourself out of it. I think you want this. I think you want us to tell you to go do it. I think you want us to tell you that INFJs have insights, all right? And that people are knocking the taco out of your hand, but it's your responsibility to not have the taco knocked out of your hand. Find a better audience. Stop looking to the outside world to validate the things you already know to be true. Go do the thing that you were put on the planet to do. Just think 10,000 hours hard about stuff and go share it with other people and get them to pay you for it. Because once they actually hand value over to you, they'll listen to you. It's no longer profit is without honor in their hometown stuff. Now it's an official transaction where they have given you cold hard resource, right? They've given you value, and now they're open to hearing your value back. and they won't do what you're talking about, all right? And that's the steps, all right? Go formalize this. Go charge for it. Go find a better audience. Stop using social media. Stop using the outside world to validate whether or not you actually have gifts. You have gifts, own them, go take them to the world. Make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you. That only last little tidbit, and I'll let her go.
Okay.
I've noticed that for me that sometimes it flips on its head, and that I double down even harder on trying to be insightful, and then I get super annoying, especially with people that I'm close to. It's like I'm trying to just, like, desperation, like, hey, look, I have these insights, instead of just kind of, it's like I'm swinging too far because I'm so empty, and I don't like what that turns me into, because maybe that's where it brings in more of the TI thing, where I get super critical about things because it's this weird blend of critical and insightful. So I think when I'm able to use it, more healthfully, where I have an outlet, an avenue where I feel like I'm being heard and being able to use it, then I don't get into that space the same way. But unfortunately, I feel like lately I've been in that negative space a lot, and I notice it, and I think it's because of that. So anyway, I don't want to keep. I can keep rambling. I can keep rambling on for hours.
Fantastic question. Lots of INFJs feel exactly the same way that you do. You're in the Intuitive Awakening Facebook group, right?
Yes.
Okay. Go pose the question to INFJs how they got into mentorship, coaching, and therapy, and have them tell you all the stuff that they went through, like what are the resistances that they dealt with, what were some of the challenges that they had to overcome, how do they make sure that they're in a good space, that they're not depleted energetically as you're going through it, what are some of the stuff that they do for self-care. And a bunch of INFJs in Intuitive Awakening are therapists, coaches, mentors, etc., and they'll give you some great advice on how to do it as an INFJ.
Thanks, Doug, for calling in.
That's actionable. Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
I hope we hear from you again soon.
Me too.
Have a great day.
Oh, you too.
Thanks.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to call in live on the air, the call-in number is in the description and also in the comment field. It's a US-based number, but feel free to go ahead and call that. And you can join us live on the air for a conversation we can have together.
Yep.
So we're going to go to the phone lines again. And I'm going to go ahead and take a call from, I hope I'm pronouncing this name correctly, Saya. Am I saying that right? Are you there?
Sia?
Sia?
Saya.
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 I don't know. I'll probably forget and mispronounce it again.
I'm not going to forget. I won't mispronounce it.
She's really good at remembering how to pronounce
It's okay.
names. But hi, Saya. Where are you calling from? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Texas right now.
You're in Texas.
Oh, as well.
Fantastic. Which, West or East
Yes.
Texas? The dusty or the humid part?
Central.
Central.
Austin.
Kind of a mix
Like we're
between the two.
humid.
Okay. Gotcha.
How can we help you today?
I actually have a pretty good understanding of MBTI. I just have a few questions I'm trying to tie up on loose ends,
Sure.
I guess. Not a few questions, like one question of comparison. One thing I'm trying to make sure I have a good understanding of is loops. I want to know, just for my understanding, because this is more because it took me a really long time to find my own type because of the nature of the environment that I grew up in, and to the point where you leave and you have to figure out who you are after that type of environment. So what I'm trying to figure out is I just want to make sure I'm understanding the difference between an INTJ loop, an INFJ loop, and an ISFP loop. The me-T, me-Fi, and the Fi-me loop.
Okay. So how do these loops compare and contrast with each other, or what are their characteristics, do you mean?
Right. Compare and contrast characteristics, yes.
Okay. So
you said INTJ. What were the three types?
INTJ, INFJ, and ISFP.
INFJ and ISFP.
All right. So one of the best ways to have a resource that will tell you about all of these loops is the Personality Hacker book, because the Personality Hacker book writes out a lot of different styles of looping as well.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
That's one
Perfect.
good place to start.
All right, so first
I did read it. It typed me as INTJ, and I've actually been suspecting that for a while, but
Okay.
there were some things in there that it wasn't quite clear on the loops.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So, so one of the things that is good to watch in loops is whether or not it's an incidental loop. It's just something that you're experiencing because you're having a bad day, or whether or not it's a loop that you're kind of living in. Like it's like an undercurrent, sort of like it doesn't feel as disruptive. It's not right, but it's more of like a chronic thing, because there's different styles of looping too.
Thing?
More of like a chronic loop, more of like a sort of an undercurrent of your life loop. So
okay.
So there's different kinds of loops too, right? As in like different sort of intensities and durations of how long the loop will last. So that's another thing, is if you're talking about like an incidental, in the moment, hard hitting loop where you're like, I can't even, versus or sort of like you've incorporated this way of being into your lifestyle and you're living in a loop. So those are two different things as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're talking about there.
Okay. So the INFJ loop, it goes to introverted thinking, right? And introverted thinking is a very disconnected, emotionally disconnected, dispassionate, cold place specifically for an INFJ. There's always like an emotional disconnect to introverted thinking because it's the opposite of extroverted feeling, which is very connected. So introverted thinking, when a person goes to, like an IFJ goes to introverted thinking as part of their loop, is the purpose of that loop is to get a break from a sense of constant, sort of a feeling like they're beholden to everybody else. There's a sense that IFJs have that they're perpetually beholden to the world, that they're supposed to be doing stuff for other people at all times, but because they're introverts, they don't want to do that, right? They don't want to always have to be beholden to other people. And so whenever they feel a sense that they must go to their auxiliary or co-pilot function and they don't want to, that's when they go to introverted thinking or accuracy as their loop, because they're basically trying to make it so that it's not their fault that they're not doing the thing that extroverted feeling is telling them to do. So the loop gives them, it cuts them some slack. It gives them some sort of emotional space. It lets them off the hook, at least temporarily. And one of the characteristics of doing that, of like not feeling responsible, is by sort of projecting that responsibility onto other people in the sense of like, well, no, it's your fault, which is one of the reasons why an introverted intuition, introverted thinking bad loop often looks very critical, right? It's like, no, you're the bad person, I'm not the bad person. And the reason why there's that projection is because the INFJ or IFJ really feels like they are being a bad person because they're supposed to be responsible to everybody else, right, at all times. And
yeah, my husband is INFJ, and I think we had a bit of a rift a while back, and that's one of the things I did notice about it.
Right. So there's like this sense of like, I'm always supposed to be doing everything for everybody else. And a part of it is because extroverted feeling is a strong, powerful influence for IFJs, but it also is one that if they haven't mastered yet, they don't know, gives them the tools within it to have breaks through boundary setting. By getting their own needs met, right? Like the more you use extroverted feeling, the more seasoned you get at it, then the more you recognize that the function itself has tools for not having to be beholden to everybody else. But if you haven't quite developed that boundary setting, you haven't developed that ability to sort of like determine who's coming in and who's allowed in at what times, and whether or not their requirements are reasonable, or whether or not they're even requiring it, you just feel a sense of guilt because you think they're supposed to have it because you see a need going unmet. That's when the person gets into a loop, and it's very cold, it's very analytical, and it's usually very critical. And then there's like stronger and less strong versions of that. When INTJs go to introverted feeling, does that make sense, by the way? You said that you've seen that in your husband who's an INFJ.
Yeah, that's exactly what I noticed when all that went down, and also what he explained with that was going through his mind when that happened as well. Mm-hmm. For me, I notice when I feel like I'm going into an unhealthy pattern, I start indulging in like feeling lots really bad.
Well, so when an INTJ or an
so that's what I'm
ITJ,
wondering.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
When an ITJ goes into a loop, they go into their feeling space because the sense of irresponsibility that they're feeling is that they're not getting enough done, that they haven't set up a system they were supposed to set up, that they're not making things happen, that they're a loser, that they're not getting their shit together.
Not being proactive.
They're not being proactive, that they should be further along than they are. Like, basically, that extroverted thinking or effectiveness co-pilot is the proactive thing that's like, okay, get your act together, go make things happen, go get projects done. Like, why aren't you, like, you're a failure at life, right? Because you're not getting these things done, you're a failure. So it's less a sense that you're beholden to people and more a sense that you're beholden to whatever metric of you're supposed to be in a certain place by this age or whatever it is, right? Like whatever metric is inside of you. And so the avoidant tactic for an ITJ then is to go into introverted feeling and going like, yeah, but that's just not who I am. Like, that's just not me. Like, I don't feel that way. And so oftentimes
I'm not
I
that
want
yet.
to deny this.
Or I'm not that yet.
Right.
Often
Or
too.
I'm not, yeah, like that's
I'll
just,
be that someday, but right now I'm not, so it's not my turn to take action.
right. Or whatever it is. So like that sense of beholdenness, again, just like with an IFJ who's like, no, you're the bad person. The ITJ goes, no, I shouldn't have to. Why does the world require this of me? Why do they have such ridiculous expectations, right? And so then it's this sense of pride, right? Like this, like I like this shoulder, or arms crossing, like I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to play by your rules, right? Like who I am is more important than what I do, right? So it goes into this whole like sort of like my identity should be more important than what I bring to the world, and who I am should have value. So it's more of like a pride issue. So is this resonating in like an uncomfortable way, you're saying?
Yes, this is horrible. It's like you're calling me out so badly, and yeah, I feel attacked.
Yeah, right? Don't at me, right? That's what I'm supposed to say. So,
Bring it, bro. I can take it.
Yep, you can take it. All right, feel it. All right. So, of course, with both of them, what you need to be doing is getting into the auxiliary function and seasoning it, right? Because effectiveness or extroverted thinking, when it's not very mature, just like extroverted feelings, like I'm beholden to everybody. Extroverted thinking is like I should be doing all the things, right? Which is unrealistic and unreasonable. But you know how it's kind of like that saying, you overestimate what you can get done in a month, but underestimate what you can get done in a year. That's sort of an extroverted thinking sort of insight, which is don't think you should be all things to all people yet, but you can actually get a lot accomplished if you focus and start building a system and start building a plan. So get to work. Extroverted thinking's answer is just get to work, right? And it doesn't matter whether or not you've hit the metric, the idealistic metric you're supposed to be at. Just don't worry about that. Just get to work. So that's the solution for that. Now, it sounds like you don't need me to talk about the ISFP one as much, but I will say that one of the characteristics of ISFPs is that they're avoiding entering a world that they think won't honor who they are, like as a person, right? Their emotions, they oftentimes feel very invalidated. They might just be in a very self-indulgent place. And they don't want to hear the messages from the world that interrupts whatever imaginative world they've created inside of themselves that they want to see as reality. And so what ends up happening is they end up going to introverted intuition or perspectives 10-year-old to imagine something that they then basically convince their senses that it has experienced. And so these are people who get very untethered from reality. Not in like an intuitive sort of like I always feel like an alien, but as in like they're like this is a sense of pride for them that they're not like other people. It's like I don't know if there's like a what is the Tumblr sort of like back in the mid-teens on Tumblr. There was all those Tumblr kids who were like saying things like I can't feel my wings when I'm sick. And it's like, okay, that person's very untethered from reality. And they probably are an ISFP that's in an introverted intuition loop, because introverted intuition is the imagination that they have wings, and they've convinced their extroverted sensing that this is a real thing that they're actually physically experiencing. So that's more of like sort of a detethering from reality sense. And they don't want to be tethered to reality. They don't want to have to like to engage with the real world and get real world feedback, because that then ruins the fun of their of whatever fairyland they're living in. Now, of course, that can take on multiple iterations and can look a lot of different ways. But basically, an ISFP in a loop is convincing their senses that their imagination is real. That make sense?
Yeah, I actually have an ISFP friend. I do remember seeing her go down that pathway. I thought it was a grip. I was like, what's going on?
Right.
I thought that was a grip. I didn't know that was the loop.
Well, incidental, hard-hitting, bad day loops, which are very obvious and big. And then you can have more undercurrent, sustainable, this is how you experience your life for a while loops. So,
So this was like for a few months that she went like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some people spend their whole life in a loop. Yeah. So, I think because of the way I was raised, I've noticed hit those loops a lot. And I've read sometimes that INTJ, when it's developed in an unhealthy way from a young age, because they had to cope by resorting to their tertiary function or something, they tend to develop into naturally using their NIFI more than NITIFI. So I noticed that I do hit the NIFI a lot, but it doesn't feel like it's something sustainable or healthy at all. So I don't know how much truth there is to that. Are you saying NISI is like the shorthand for the polarities, like NISE?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
NISI.
Oh.
Sorry, I use Japanese vowels.
Phonetically.
Okay, got it. Yeah. All right. So like, I mean, INTJs, the other thing too is that how an INTJ manifests and how they grow up. Like, yeah, there are a lot of contexts that are very friendly to how an INTJ shows up, but also your Enneagram type is going to probably come in here, and a bunch of other stuff. So INTJs can sort of develop.
I'm a 5.
Yeah. Okay. Which is pretty common for INTJs. So what happens on a lot of INTJ 5s, and do you know what your subtype is? Do you know if you're sexual, social, or self-preservation? It's okay if you don't.
SXSP.
Okay, so self-preservation 5. Okay.
SXSP,
Oh no,
yeah.
sexual 5.
No.
Oh, self-pres.
Sexual self-preservation. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, like in order of strength, SX is my strongest, SP is my second.
Got it. Okay, so sexual 5s, if I'm not mistaken, are actually quite romantic. They're the 5s that have a tendency to like idealize like the sort of perfect other that they're looking for. And so an INTJ that's a sexual 5 can get into sort of a romantic.
It's not been for that. I heard it was, sorry, you can correct me.
No.
I heard the SX for instinctual variance, it can be romantic, but it doesn't mean always towards people. It can also mean like wanting to merge with whatever you find a fascination with. Like, could be a topic, like get to know everything, absolutely everything about it deeply. It could be a person. It could be a hobby. It could be something like you want to just be in that groove with or something. That's what I heard the SX was. Is it only about people?
No, so I'm not talking about sexual. I'm talking about 5 sexuals. Because the sexual piece, yeah, because I'm a sexual 3. And so yes, creative merging, lots of like there are certain characteristics for sexual subtypes themselves, but I'm talking about the amalgamation of a sexual 5, because sexual 5s have very distinctive characteristics that don't necessarily follow. Like a sexual 5 is very different than a sexual 1 is. So the school of thought that we go with is Beatrice Chestnut's subtypes. And in her opinion, there's an alchemical response when you take this subtype or the instinct and merge it with the type. And so there are some characteristics of like the sexual instinct, but there's a very specific alchemical response when you merge the sexual instinct with a 5 specifically. So you as a sexual 5 would actually look different than me as a sexual 3. We're still going to have similarities. We're still going to want to like merge with people and not in like a sexual romantic way necessarily. We just really enjoy intimacy. Like I would say that intimacy is like the favorite word of sexual subtypes, and that could be intimacy with anything. It could be, like you said, intimacy with a intimacy with a concept or whatever, but it's most fun when it's with the person. But specifically, sexual fives have a characteristic of idealization of partnership. And I think it's part of that whole sort of wanting to find the perfect thing before moving forward. It's the ivory tower piece that's merged with the sexual subtype piece. And so it makes them almost weirdly romantic for a five. And so sexual fives that are INTJs can become weirdly romantic, like almost uncharacteristic, like in a way where most people don't think of INTJs as romantic, but a sexual five INTJ can be kind of weirdly romantic, looking for sort of that idealized partner. And in that way, they can have more of sort of what's the word?
Idealization?
Like more of a fantasy sort of relationship, and they can sort of live in their fantasies a little bit more, which I could see why somebody would want to make sure that they weren't an ISFP if they were a sexual five INTJ. We didn't lose you, right?
Saya's still here.
Okay, so she's still here.
You're here with us, right, Saya? If we did lose her.
I think we actually might have lost her. So hopefully.
There we go. She's back.
Now you're back.
Hi.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Somehow the headphone button got pushed on the thing.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you heard any of that or if you were on hold.
I heard it all except for just like the 15 seconds between me figuring out that I had disconnected and calling back in.
Okay.
That's it. So
All right.
I heard pretty much everything.
Okay, cool. All right. So I could see if an INTJ was a sexual five, why they would want to go, I'm not as ISFP, right? But I'm hearing that you're vibing with the INTJ stuff, and maybe that loop is the one that feels the most like you.
Yeah, and it took a long time for me to even look at INTJ. The funny thing is, because I just, like, the test kept bouncing around, and then when it finally hit INTJ, like, because I also started, after the test started bouncing around, I'm like, okay, this isn't reliable. How do I find my type? And then at one point, the test hit INTJ, and I look at it, all the stereotype stuff is what I read. I'm like, this can't be me. This can't be me. That's not me. That's impossible. And so I just kind of put it off. That was like one of the last ones I looked at. And then when I finally looked at it and just decided to step past the stereotypes and go off of what I knew of the function,
yeah,
I go and join the group, and I find a lot more people that actually, like females specifically, communicate like me, talk like me, think like me, and express like me. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. I've been mistyping myself for ages.
Well, congratulations on getting to that point. That's always like a really cathartic moment when you're like, especially like you said, when you get past the stereotypes. I mean, a stereotype of an ENTP is not really something I resonate with that much either. I mean, I am talky. I'm a know-it-all teacher. I do a lot of things that are very ENTP, but the idea of like being sort of like the earliest stereotypes that I saw of ENTPs were all like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. And I was like, I don't really identify with that. So getting rid of the stereotypes and like just looking at the functions and identifying that, and then finding other people who are similar, like INTJ women in particular for you, that's the best way to go about it. So congratulations on finding your best.
Yeah, the INTJs, like when I finally realized I could be one and I got past the stereotypes, I was so pissed at the stereotypes. I was like, are you freaking serious?
Yeah. But I mean, they're helpful for some people, I guess, and they live for a reason. But yeah, cool.
Right, true. Like, because the general amount of them probably do exhibit those traits, but I think that's more of an overtime matured thing. They don't really talk about the other forms of development or unhealthy. They talk about the unhealthy, but it's really lesser talked about with INTJ. I found it's hard to find that info.
Yeah.
So,
well, especially with
the end of functions really made it a little bit easier to kind of get a grasp of concept.
Yeah, totally. The whole concept of the like sort of the INTJ cold mastermind that's like twirling their mustache and steepling their fingers and trying to take over the world. I think that's why I think it's been like 5 years now, but I wrote an article about how INTJs are actually squishy and soft on the inside and way more emotional than they let on. And there was a couple of people who said that was the first time that they had ever heard anybody acknowledge that. And so it's like, you just gotta get to the nougaty center to really understand an INTJ.
Thank you.
And I found it's like, once you get to that squishy soft center, it's harder for me to lock back up against you, even if you totally do me wrong and I hate your guts. It's harder for me because I got used to being expressive around you. So it's really, really difficult to lock that back down, but it takes time and I can do it. But it's just like, you got to that point and I hate your guts for it.
Yep. Yeah, you sound very INTJ to me. All right. Did we answer your question? Do you feel good?
Thank you, Saya.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for calling in.
Hope to hear from you again soon.
Yeah,
okay?
totally.
Tune back in on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks again for calling in. Cool. So if you want to call in, we could probably take another like 1 or 2 more callers before we have to wrap up for this episode, this show for today. The number is in the description or in the comment area. We keep reposting it. If you're watching back later and you're not joining us live, we're glad you were here as well. And you should tune into a live show to where you can call in and talk to us live on the air. It'd be awesome if you could call in and be a part of the conversation as far as that goes. And as far as this coming week coming up, you had talked about before we had started the show formally about the podcast coming. We put some links in the descriptions here. This Monday, we've got a podcast coming up talking about time and the cognitive functions. The cognitive functions of the Myers-Briggs system. We're going to take those and compare and contrast them with how they think and
Experience time.
Yeah,
The
time.
relationship to time.
Their relationship to time. I think it's going to be a really cool audio podcast coming out on the main podcast channel for Personality Hacker this coming week. And again, if you're listening to this in the future, hi from the future, or hi from the past, I guess.
Hi from the past.
Glad you're here, but you'll have to go back and find that episode somewhere, and we'll probably have a link in the description as well for you. So cool. We have no more callers today for season 1, episode 1. We're going to continue this show throughout season 1 here, get several episodes under our belt, recalibrate, and then go for season 2 as we keep refining the show, getting better and better at what we do here. This is our first episode, so we're glad you joined us. Anything else you want to say before we close out?
No, I think this is good. Like Joel's mentioned, we're finding our sea legs, so we're figuring it out.
Go pick up a copy of Personality Hacker. It's our book. You can get it at major retailers online. Our recommendation is you order it from a local bookstore, so you can support your local bookstore and literacy in your local area. So that's cool. But you can also order online and get the book shipped right to you. Love to have you have a copy of that. And if you've got questions from the book, this would be a great place to come and have questions on the next episode from the book. If you've got things that are coming up for you or insights or ahas that you have as well.
All right.
So cool. Thanks so much for being with us for season 1, episode 1 of Personality Hacker TV. I'm Joel Mark Witz.
I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next episode. Bye.